Hello, in this broadcast, the information program time. In Grozny, combat continued today. All day, the parts of the city controlled by the Dudayev forces were under fire. According to the agency Tartas, to enter Grozny from the previously relatively calm southwesterly direction is now dangerous because this region is constantly shot at from heavy caliber systems and artillery rounds systems. Combat clashes are continuous near the trolley car lot, which is located 800 meters from the presidential palace. In areas which are controlled by the federal forces, Dudayev supporters at night are launching ambushes. Our personal correspondents reported today from Grozny. This is how the presidential palace looks today. That is what remains of it. The same demise befell the ministerial council building. The entire central part of Grozny is demolished, and shells continue to fly and fly, turning block after block into ruins. At times one cannot discern who is shooting at whom. As previously, snipers give no rest, shooting day and night. They're targeting mostly Russian officers, but lately regular soldiers and peaceful residents become more frequent victims of their bullets. There are many snipers here. Among them, there are mujahids from Afghanistan, Jordan, Lithuanians, Ukrainians, and many nationalities. The number of victims of the war grows. The landing of one such grenade was apparently sufficient to bury under the rubble of a house 33 Russian soldiers at one time. Now, our forces are in control of a significant part of Grozny. The Dudayev gunmen are resisting in desperation and are fighting with their inherent insidiousness and slyness. They usually work in threes: grenade launchers, artillerymen, and snipers. They do their shooting and quickly relocate to new positions. The contingents of Russian forces constantly narrow the circle around the targets, and attempts are made to take the river Sunja by force and to become entrenched on the opposite bank. If this is successful, the city will fully be under the control of the Russian forces. Then the mission of the military personnel will be considered to be complete, but the war will not likely end. All of its burden will fall on the shoulders of the internal forces. We just received news of 2 presidential decrees which set out the conditions to restore constitutional organs of rule in the Chechen Republic. In the first decree, the president supported the creation of a committee of national accord in the Chechen Republic as an organ facilitating a search for means of reconciliation and will cooperate in creating constitutional organs of rule in Chechnya. The Federative Council and the State Duma and the Central Election Commission, pursuant to that decree, are offered to provide the necessary aid to the Committee of National Accord in coordinating its activities with the federal organs of power. Territorial rule of the federal organs of executive power in the Chechen Republic must facilitate interaction with the Committee of National Accord in Chechnya in search of paths to regularize the crisis in the Republic. Through the second decree, the President appointed Nikolai Semyonov today as head of the Territorial Department of the Federal Organs of Executive Rule in Chechnya in the capacity of Deputy Chairman of the Government of Russia. By the same decree, Nikolai Yegorov is dismissed from that post for reasons of health. The acting general prosecutor of Russia, Alexei Yulushenko, stated today that in the near future, Dudayev will be arraigned and a mode of curtailing him has been selected, that is, to retain him under guard. Alexei Yulushenko announced that all forces will be given direct orders to detain Dudayev and his closest entourage. Today in the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, the journalists met with the soldiers of one of the special subdivisions of quick response who have arrived from Chechnya. According to them, fighting on the Dudayev side are well-trained gunmen and mercenaries from various points of the former Soviet Union. Basically, these are snipers and grenade launchers. As one of the special designation troops admitted, it's very difficult to fight with them. The Chechens are launching targeted fire to fully defeat commanders and officers using any types of covers which they studied and learned before. The special designation units say that it's difficult to locate them because the gunmen wear common soldiers' uniforms of the Russian army. Now in Chechnya there is a second wave of events. And of course to make unequivocal conclusions now before the war ends is difficult. No one can do that. But if we will be withdrawing our forces or reduce the number of special squads there, that means the war will be protracted. And now summer is upon us, and it will be even more complex to fight. 6 Russian soldiers who are in prison among the Chechen gunmen have been handed over to their mothers, who came from various regions of Russia, to Grozny. According to the Deputy Authorized Commissioner on Human Rights of Russia, Sergei Sirotkin, who is currently in Nazran together with the released soldiers, the Chechen side will not release any more prisoners unilaterally and offers that an exchange be used. This girl, the 16-year-old Nadezhda Sultanova, devastating tragedy hit. In an instance, she lost her mother, 2 sisters, her father is in hospital. Nadezhda's leg was amputated by doctors. The war is underway in another republic, but its black wing has touched on Ingushetian villages. In Bamutia and Ashta, aviation was again deployed up to half an hour before our arrival. Whether in the villages there are Dudayev gunmen who left Grozny, it's difficult for us to confirm. In any case, the deputies of the Federative Council, Pavel Stein and Igor Gladkov, were not met here with weapons. Of course, for the Russian military personnel, the presence of gunmen is best verified from land than air, because neither the elderly people nor the women are protected from shells. What we observed here today has nothing in common with the restoration of constitutional order or a struggle with militarized gangs or formations. That is, we have to observe the Constitution. We'll tell our television viewers, Nadezhda Sultanova is from the Ingushetian village, Ashta, with her 2 younger sisters, is left without a means for survival. And she needs not only medical treatment, apart from the prosthesis, which she cannot yet afford. The girl needs to be given back her faith in life. The Chechen crisis complicates the situation in neighboring Dagestan. Russian military feel that Dudayev supporters intend to provoke armed clashes with the Russian forces on the territory of Dagestan. According to Interfax from military sources, in areas heavily populated by Chechens, in the city of Hosavyurt, for example, a growth of tension was noted among the population because agitation is being sown in support of the Dudayev regime. Conditions to hold free democratic elections in Chechnya can be created within 2 to 3 months. This opinion was expressed during a meeting with the Chechen religious leaders in Moscow, the Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin. They, the muftis, represent the basic organ of Muslim leadership in Chechnya, which existed during the years of the Soviet rule. At a meeting with the higher federal government, the members of the muftiat said they're ready for any concessions to stop the bloodshed. They said that they are supported currently by more than 70% of the population of Chechnya, which is forming, in its villages and regions, temporary structures of power not in submission to Dudayev. The clergy offered on the basis of that movement to create so-called peace zones and asked Viktor Chernomyrdin to instruct the military not to launch bomb or artillery attacks on those regions. This, the members of the Muftiat of Chechnya stated immediately after a meeting at the press conference. The elders assured Viktor Stepanovich that if there is such a goodwill found among the military command, we will do everything possible to immediately stop the war on Chechen land. The Chechen Muftiat is certain that given goodwill, the war can be stopped immediately. In the United States, visiting currently, there is a certain Shamsidin Yusuf, who is claiming to be the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chechnya. In this connection, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia today called on the American Ambassador in Moscow, Thomas Pickering. The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Igor Ivanov, told the American Ambassador that in Moscow, serious bewilderment is being expressed regarding the reception in the United States of the imposter who is pursuing definite provocational aims. Confidence was expressed that the American side will undertake all necessary steps in order so as not to permit his contact with the official American representatives under whatever pretext. A similar démarche was undertaken along the line of the Embassy of Russia in Washington. Our correspondent Sergei Gorichev in Washington reported that Shamsidin Yusuf stated literally the following: "A true war has not yet begun, and if it does begin, I think we will burn Moscow. We do have people who can do this."
I think we burn Moscow because we have people who can do that.
These words of the Chechen representative are quoted by all American newspapers today. Shamsidin Yusuf arrived in America after visiting Saudi Arabia and Turkey. The aim is to enlist America's support and receive contemporary oil equipment for Chechnya. At a meeting with the press, he said that he's already met with several congressmen. However, he refused to name his interlocutors. Shamsidin Yusuf speaks no Russian. He was born in Jordan and makes his foreign trips using this Russian passport. In an interview to to Ostankino, Yusuf stated that he daily speaks with Dudayev over the telephone. Dudayev, according to him, is in Grozny. Talks with Boris Yeltsin, according to Yusuf's assertments, will not be held, possibly with Sergei Kovalyov. We were shown the Chechen currency, the tumas, which are already printed in an unnamed country. The rate is already planned, 10 tumas for $1 American. The new Chechen passports are being printed in Germany. Meanwhile, a representative of the State Department, Christine Shelley, implied that United States, in essence, has recognized Moscow's refusal to hold talks with Dudayev. We understand that that's their position, said Shelley. In the Russian embassy here in Washington, we received confirmation that they have received assurances there will be no meetings between representatives of Clinton's administration with Yusuf. The question of the possibility of resolving the Chechen crisis is raised by all now who have an opportunity to meet with Russian leadership, including influential and reputable social activists of world renown who have never previously visited Russia. For 2 days in Moscow, intense meetings are being held between the leadership of Russia and the head of the Shiite Muslim community, Prince Karim Aga Khan. He's the 49th heir apparent Imam of the Muslims. Apart from the fact that he's one of the richest men in the world, he also heads the Fund of Development and Humanitarian Aid, which aids more than 3 million people on the planet in the most difficult circumstances because of national or religious conflicts shredding the planet at the end of the century. His Highness, the Prince Aga Khan, has visited almost all countries of the world where aid of his fund is needed. His fund has provided humanitarian aid for 2 years to the residents of Gorny Badakhshan in Tajikistan, and his visit to Russia signifies that the moment has come when aid to Russia in respect to relations with its autonomies in the former USSR republics has become vitally necessary. Yesterday he met with Vladimir Shumeka and Oleg Lobov, today with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev, and the head of the government of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin. After that meeting, he said to the press that he came to speak with the leadership of Russia about those regions of Europe and Asia which confessionally are close to him and which he knows best, and that is mostly Tajikistan. Yes, after certain doubts dispelled by today's meetings, we will continue our aid to Tajikistan so as to resolve the conflict peacefully and to hold democratic elections. The conversation touched on problems of other regions of Russia, characteristic, in the opinion of His Highness, of all countries of the world, while shifting toward pluralism and democracy. Of course, the meeting of Viktor Chernomyrdin with Prince Aga Khan did not bypass the question of Chechnya and humanitarian aid to Chechnya after the combat operation ends, but he preferred not to speak about this. This will be learned a little later, after the conclusion of his visit. The commission investigating the events in Chechnya created by the State Duma will continue its work despite the statement of the president. This was said to a correspondent of Время by a member of that commission from the Russia's Choice faction, Boris Zolotukhin. I'll remind you, yesterday in Lipetsk, President Boris Yeltsin stated the Duma had no constitutional right to create such a commission. Truly, according to the Constitution, the parliament has not got controlling functions. However, the deputy Zolotukhin emphasized no one can forbid the gathering of information. The fact in itself of gathering information does not violate the Constitution. Today, the delegation of the Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe flew to Mozdok, which plans to visit Chechnya and Ingushetia. It was planned that together with the OSCE delegation on the same plane to Mozdok would be the Commissioner on Human Rights of Russia, Sergei Kovalyov. However, his surname was not included on the passenger list of that plane. Hence, he stated today to the radio station Echo Moscow that he will demand an explanation of what occurred personally from President Yeltsin, to whom he sent an open letter. Sergei Kovalyov feels that the only one capable of impeding his departure could have been the Minister of Defense, Pavel Gorbachev. I'll remind you in this connection the opinion of Sergei Filatov, who said that the West will assess the state of affairs in Chechnya on the basis of the next week's address by Sergei Filatov at the Parliamentary Assembly of the European Union in Strasbourg. Despite the fact that the majority of the session was unusually calm, by evening, when the deputies were discussing the performance of Sergei Kovalyov and Pavel Gorbachev, it was tumultuous. Although the Duma carried no sensational decisions today, the parliamentarians will return to the Commission on Human Rights the 10th of February. By that date, a resolution must be completed. More emotional was the discussion of the fate of the Minister of Defense. A war is underway, and at midstream, we don't change horses. It's impossible for a man to be in the post of a minister who doesn't understand the price of his words, who can't control his emotions, who doesn't understand what damage he causes by his boorishness to the country and its international prestige. They should be honored with titles of heroes, given combat titles, raise their salaries, because what they did today should have been done long ago. As a result, for the dismissal of Gorbachev, 121 deputies were in favor, but this quantity was insufficient to recommend to the president to dismiss the minister. Apart from the individuals, Gorbachev and Kovalyov, nothing caused such emotion at the session, even the attempts of the tireless deputy Marchev. Today, on the 27th of January 1955, this is the 51st anniversary of the removal of the enemy blockade. That is why I'm wearing a thermal vest of a worker of the Kirovsky plant today and ask all the deputies to support and restore the name of the city on the Neva, Leningrad. But parliamentarians didn't support their colleague, and the city was not renamed yet again. Evidently, the balanced progress of the major part of the session influenced the productivity of the deputies' work today. The Duma adopted several laws and examined all questions included in the agenda, which happens not often. Having fruitfully labored at the session, the parliamentarians all next week will be working in the districts. The annual address of the President of Russia to the Federal Assembly should erase questions emerging in the world community regarding events in Chechnya. This was stated by the head of the administration of the President, Sergei Filatov. He said that the address, which is expected in the beginning of February, is awaited not just in the Federal Assembly, but in Europe and the entire world. Russian border troops, together with the federal forces, are located in Chechnya, but are not involved in combat operations. Their functions are restricted only to protecting the national border of Russia and control the administrative border of Chechnya with the adjacent regions. As was stated to the press by the Deputy Director of the Federal Border Services, Alexei Shcherbakov, this is done in order to prevent the penetration onto the territory of the Chechen Republic of gunmen, weapons and ammunition. Since the beginning of combat in Chechnya, in the Islamic world, there's a stirring among forces ready to provide Dudaev and field commanders with military and financial aid, and the mission of the border troops is to create reliable barriers on their path. The current geopolitical situation, considering the new hub of war in the Caucasus, requires the creation of a system to protect the national borders along the northern Caucasus, where we have gone within the last 2 years. The heads of the Federal Border Service complained about great financial difficulties experienced by their department. In the budget for this year for the border needs, a little more than 2 trillion has been allocated instead of the required 5. If such financing of border troops continues in the future, several stretches of the border will soon be unprotected. Another incident occurred on the Georgian-Abkhazian border in the Galsk region. A unit of Abkhazian militia was attacked, as a result of which 1 militiaman was killed, 2 seriously injured. Interfax reports that the attack occurred in the security zone, which is controlled by Russian peacekeeping forces. The life of the former Minister of Defense of Georgia, Georgy Karkarashvili, who was injured as a result of a terrorist act in Moscow, in the opinion of attending physicians, is already out of danger. Karkarashvili regained consciousness and is regaining normally to his surroundings. According to the preliminary opinion of the law enforcement organs, this was a hired assassination attempt. Those who assigned it and those who executed it should be sought among the compatriots of the Georgian general. On this day, 50 years ago, Soviet forces liberated the concentration camps in Oswiecim. Our soldiers saw much during the years of war, but what he saw here forced him to shudder. Since the creation of the world, the human intellect created nothing more monstrous nor disgusting than this enormous factory of death. Mountains of bones and ashes, that is all that remained from the 4 million people who were brought here from various parts of Europe. In special hospitals and surgical laboratories of Oswiecim, the Nazi medics performed experiments on live humans. In a special status within the camps were Soviet prisoners of war and the Jews. They were exterminated using the latest accomplishments of science and technology. In Oswiecim in 1941, on the Russian military prisoners of war, for the first time the gas Cyclone B was used. Through brutal and refined means, the other inferior peoples were exterminated. The Czechs, the Poles, the Yugoslavs, the Gypsies, all who didn't meet the requirements of the supreme Aryan race. The clothing and hair of those executed with German precision were sorted and stored in special barracks as valuable raw materials for the German industry. And all of this in the center of the enlightened Europe in the middle of the 20th century. History yet again confirmed the sad truth. No civilization can ensure the public against an outburst of wildness and barbarism. And today certain nations, calling themselves cultured and civilized, openly mock the tombs of our soldiers who extinguished the flames in Hitler's crematorium furnaces and declare hundreds of thousands of people to be of a non-indigenous nationality to be second-class citizens. Now, however, this is called a battle with the totalitarian past. But it's too well known how, in practice, the attempts to divide people according to nationality into inferior or adequate ended first-class or second-class people. Today, the victims of Ostankino call out to us from their pits, people, stop, this should not be repeated. Commemorative functions on this date were held in Krakow. Representatives of more than 30 countries gathered there to honor the memory of the victims of fascism and to adopt a message to the countries and nations of the world on peace and tolerance. They are preserved as a symbol of all evil in man, as a symbol of the barbarism of the 20th century, and as a forewarning. The Hitler concentration camps, Auschwitz and Birkenau, the largest cemeteries on the world without a single grave. 1.5 million people from all of Europe were killed and incinerated here. Today, on the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Ostankino, a small Polish village near which the Hitler forces erected these factories of death. Here, representatives of 29 countries gathered. The majority of delegations were headed by presidents and monarchs. The Russian delegation was headed by the personal representative of the president, the chairman of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin. Rabbis, ksens, and Orthodox priests, mullahs, honored the memory of martyrs with prayers. On behalf of those present, an admonition for peace and tolerance was read. Although these celebrations were dedicated to the anniversary of the liberation of the death camps, any honors to those who actually did this, the Soviet soldiers, were not provided. The memory of Ostankino victims was honored today in the Central House of Cinematographers in Moscow. A memorable evening, Ostankino, the Tragedy of the 20th Century, was held. The exhibit in the foyer acquainted the public with unique archive documents. Later on the stage, there were former prisoners and liberators performing famous social activists and historians. The city on the Neva River noted another date connected with the Great Patriotic War, the 51st anniversary of the full lifting of the blockade of Leningrad. The 27th of January 1944, the last day of the blockade and the first day of peace. More than half a century has passed, and yet today the eternal fire of memory does not fade. What is this old soldier contemplating? Maybe he remembers how on the 8th of September 1941 on Leningrad, a barrage of shells and bombs fell. From that autumn day on, the countdown of the blockade days began. And yet he was a boy then, but he rose to the defense of his native city. He saw the tears, the blood, and the death of his fellow soldiers. But the enemy did not break either the will or faith of the people, and the long-awaited day of victory at Leningrad arrived. Probably each one who went through the test of war and withstood experiences today a sensation of endless joy and sorrow for those who didn't live to see the bright January day. Today, in the consumer basket of any Russian citizen, goods of foreign production are well entrenched and familiar. Without them, it's impossible to imagine the daily life of the Russian population. But prior to ending up on the shelves of stores, all import must be sifted through customs sieves. About how this is done at a meeting with the press, the heads of the customs committee spoke. According to its chairman, Anatoly Kruglov, only last year, the customs workers brought into the national treasury 14 trillion rubles, that is 1/5 1/5 of all tax revenues. The department, created 3 years ago, had to start practically with scratch. In the Soviet Union, given a monopoly on foreign trade, the functions of the customs were completely different than now, with transparent borders, and the nature of customs crime has changed. Of broad application is the so-called white-collar or simply white contraband crime. The white contraband smuggles cargoes legally but with false documents or declare reduced values of their goods in order to evade paying taxes. To deal with them, economic knowledge is necessary. The new generation of customs officials will receive that knowledge in the autumn in a special academy which will open, but the current committee employees are successfully battling with violators of the customs code. Last year, they detained 7,500 items of antiquity and art, 1,500 units of firearms, more than 12,000 ammunition units, and almost 3 tons of narcotics. 2,000 smuggling cases were filed. In the lead are strategically important raw materials, so that Russia will not become a unique vacuum cleaner which pumps out raw materials to the West. Customs barriers will not be lifted from Ukraine or Belarus. The largest number of workers of the KAMAZ auto plant as of today will begin a 3-day work week. This year, KAMAZ plans to produce 45,000 automobiles, and for this only 60,000 employees are required. Currently at the plant, there are 2.5 times more than that employed. Fearing mass layoffs, the administration of the plant preferred yet another decrease in the number of days in the work week. The continued decline of productivity, in the opinion of the majority of directors of companies, is caused by the size and number of taxes. More than 20 types of withholdings or various funds eat up to almost 90% of profits. The general director of the joint stock company Liberetsky Carpets, a man of nuclear energy, clarifies the situation even more clearly. Of the 22 work days, 17 is taken by the government and only 5 we work for ourselves. Meanwhile, there's no decline at the Liberetsky plant. The plant annually manages to increase its production of goods. Last year alone, they've developed 150 new designs. In productivity altogether, there's 1670, and each is produced in 5 colors. The carpet makers dismiss another old stereotype. Statistics assert that 26 million citizens live below poverty level, and each year the plant puts onto the market 20% more of these luxury items, and they're bought. And that, given the fact that foreign competitors in Russia are abundant. In brief, the annual results, which were concluded today, are 6.5 million square meters of carpet and 3 new plants. Some time ago, the government decided to conduct an experiment and allotted a credit to the company of 5 billion rubles. And they proved their affluence. Within 3 months, in the form of taxes, they returned 20 billion additional. Now they're offering themselves to be subjected to a new experiment. Let them experiment on us with a new scientifically based tax policy, and we, by 30% this year, will increase the yield of our goods, for which we will find a market ourselves. The money will go into the budget. That will be at least 60 billion we'll give additionally to the budget. Are these not figures? The battle here is ardent, and that's how they'll succeed. They say wealth brings more wealth. The course of economic reform in Russia is irreversible. This was stated at a press conference in Davos, where the World Economic Forum is underway, by the first deputy, the chairman of the government of Russia, Anatoly Chubais. According to Tartas, however, he did not exclude possibly establishing a fixed rate of the ruble against the dollar. Anatoly Chubais clarified that the realization of such a project will be evidence of strength and not weakness of the ruble. Calling for careful reforms of international institutions, which played an important role in post-war history, was the American President Bill Clinton in his address to the participants of the World Economic Forum in the Swiss city Davos. In the address, which was broadcast through satellite, the president indicated that the international institutions, which served the world for almost half a century, now should be brought into compliance with new realities. The goal is that, he said, they should facilitate deepening cooperation. Today, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, met with the envoys of the trio of the European Union. They are France, the Federal Republic of Germany and Spain, and the head of the Commission of the European Union in Moscow. They ratified a plan of contact between Russia and the EU for the next months. The Russian side emphasized the importance of an expeditious signing of a temporary agreement on trade between Russia and the European Union and ratification of the agreement on partnership and cooperation. Today, in Berlin, the Congress of Democratic Socialism convened. This is the renewed heiress of the former ruling GDR party, the Socialist United Party of Germany. Adherents to the communist ideas in Romania have found another reason for the mass demonstration of their views. In Bucharest, near the tomb of Nicolae Ceausescu, a rally was held. On the birthday of the former president of Romania, thousands of people came here to honor his memory. In the 5 years which passed after the coup of the dictatorship in the country, grandiose changes occurred. In the 1980s, only in wonderful dreams could Romanians see such shelves in their stores filled with goods from the entire world. But even in a nightmare, one couldn't imagine the prices for those goods. If one considers other necessary expenses and measure them against the average salary, it will be clear that the standard of living for the regular Romanian is lower than even in the days of Ceausescu. Therefore, the concern of workers doesn't cease, and the number of visitors to the dictator's grave grows. And yet the majority of the population, as previously, is on Ionescu's side. It supports his policy of small steps through which the country slowly but surely is embarking on the democratic path of development. How long will the distribution of power continue depends on the Romanian economy. The government assures that this year will be decisive for its recovery. People hope in that, but their patience is not boundless. The President of France, François Mitterrand, said today that he feels the embargo levied by the United States against Cuba to be silly. He said he personally told some of the last American presidents that they should lift this embargo, which has no longer any meaning and oppresses the poor people, said Mitterrand, awarding the Order of Honorary Legion to a Cuban orthopedic physician. More than 20 counties in the west, north, and east of France have been gripped by flood. Tens of rivers have flooded their banks. The water flooded hundreds of villages. In the west, because of the floods, already 5 people have died. In the east, torrential rains are accompanied by hurricane winds whose velocity in places reaches 100 kilometers per hour. In Toul, the strongest gust overturned a crane which, falling on a school building, killed 6 adolescents and injured 8. In the next 3 days, the situation may continue to worsen. From the Atlantic onto France, air masses are surging in, carrying a powerful rain charge. Today in Moscow, the seminar Orthodoxy on Television came to a close, in the framework of which the Festival of Films and Television Programs was held. Organizers were the Enlightenment Society, Radonezh, and the Institute to Elevate Qualifications of Employees of Television and Radio Broadcasting. More than 30 companies from all parts of Russia displayed around 100 works. To the best, the Holy Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II, awarded prizes and diplomas. Gold medals, the gold medal of St. Sergius of Radonezh went to the film of the Nizhgorod's television company called Pristol, that is, Throne or Altar. Special diplomas of the jury noted the Ostankino program, The Russian World, for its artistic and publicistic position. The winners and participants of the festival were congratulated by the chairman of Ostankino, Alexander Yakovlev, and said that the best works should be aired. For now, on the air of Ostankino, the news continues with the sports information. Oksana Polonskaya, all the best. Good evening. Briefly about the main sports events. The rivalry for the entry into the semi-final of the 8 continues of the European Basketball Championships among the club teams. In the 10th round, the Madrid Real beat Maccabi 76-64, and now in Group A there are 3 clear leaders, Scavalini, Panathinaikos, and Real. The fate of the 4th pass will be decided between the Army and Maccabi teams. In the finale of the Open Australian Tennis Championships, Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras will meet. In the semi-finals, Agassi beat Aaron Christian in 2 sets. In the third, when Agassi was ahead 3-0, Christian refused to continue, and a defeat was counted for him. And among the women final pairs, Natalia Zvereva, Gigi Fernandez lost to the second pair, Aranka Sanchez and Yana Novotná. Incidentally, Sanchez can do a goal double in Melbourne. In the final, she will meet with the French Marie Pierce. The NHL news: for the first time on the ice after his disqualification for 3 matches, Sergei Fedorov scored his first goal of the season in the match Detroit-Calgary, the score 5-1. The offense player of the British team Manchester United, Rick Contonadis, was disqualified till the end of the season by the owners of his team for attacking a fan in the last match. The International Figure Skating Union barred the Olympic champion Oksana Bayul from participating in its competitions until April '96 because all last season she spent on the professional ice. In September, in Italy, the first World Combat Games will start. Participating will be representatives of the Armed Forces of Russia. This was stated at the press conference held in Moscow. The Moscow International Judo Championships will begin tomorrow in the sports complex Chertanov. Champions of Olympiads Europe from 20 countries of the world will compete, and the observers are the highest levels of the International Federation. Good evening. As a rule, January ends with cold weather. However, during the last days, the temperature has exceeded the norm by 10%. The reason for that is an Atlantic cyclone reaching the European part of Russia. One of them will shift from the Baltic Sea to the northeast of Europe tomorrow. Along its path on the weekend in the Leningrad district, Karelia on the Kola Peninsula, and the Arhangelsk district, abundant snows will pass through with blizzards, temperatures from 0 to -5. In the Nenetsk Autonomous District, the Republic of Komi, the Volgovetsk area, in the zone of an atmospheric front, there will be snow, blizzard, and winds up to 20 meters per second. The temperatures will be -3 to 8. After the departing cyclone, in the countries of the Baltic region, Kaliningrad, the pressure will grow. There will be fewer clouds. Precipitation will cease. Temperatures are around 0. On Sunday, another cyclone from the west again will worsen the weather. In the central Chernozem area, partly cloudy skies without significant precipitation, temperatures around 0. A zone of abundant snowfall and blizzards is moving to the area along the Volga. Day temperatures -2 to 7. On the lower Volga, it's warmer, 0 +5. In the Ural area, -5, 10. In the northern Caucasus, variably cloudy. In the morning hours, fog. In northern Ossetia and Ingushetia, +1 to 4. In the Chechen Republic, Dagestan, +3 to 8. During the day, at night around 0. An atmospheric front will be the culprit for the cloudy, rainy weather in the Stavropol and Krasnodar Rim areas, the lower Don area. During the day, +5 to 10 degrees. Around Sochi, +14 to 16, and some light rain. In Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, the pressure will continue to grow. There will be some breaks in the clouds, and the precipitation will cease. Temperatures during the day, 0 +5. Beyond the Caucasus, partly cloudy skies in Georgia, Azerbaijan, +8 to 13. In Armenia, 3 to 8 degrees above 0. In St. Petersburg, cloudy skies during the day, -2 to 4. And in Moscow, the weather is simply terrible. Snow mixed with rain, rain mixed with snow, winds, enormous puddles. And wherever there are no puddles, it's very slippery. And, you know, maybe that's why we wish you especially to have a cozy evening. Meteorologists feel that the weather will not change significantly. Temperatures at night around 0, during the day 0 +2. That concludes the broadcast. Goodbye.